Okay, hello everyone and welcome back to World of Tanks Blitz, and today I'm going to be doing a bit of a different video. I've had some requests for another garage tour, as it were, so I'll just be zipping through all the tiers and just, I don't know, showing what I have in my garage here. So we'll be going from tiers 1 up to 10, and of course starting at tier 1 I have got the Panzer 1 up, and it's terrible what they've done to the low tiers. Still, after all this time, no one likes update 5.5. They stripped all of the low tier vehicles apart from like one per nation and just made a very linear way up, and yes, it makes it easier for people to progress, but at the same time it just makes it very bland for any new players, because they'll just have the same tank over and over again that they'll be fighting. You just don't get the diversity as you do in higher tiers, where we've still got tanks, etc, etc. And one of the worst hit things is the Panzer II, because you remember the Panzer II before update 5.5, right? It's a tier 2 light tank, had a flak 38, 8 rounds in the magazine, fired in burst of 2 for a total of 4 bursts. Yeah, it doesn't have any of that now. It's got 3 shells in the magazine. 3 shells in the magazine doing 12 damage. 12, 24, 36 damage for the 5-second reload. Which isn't bad, however it's nowhere near the old magazine, because these shells will fire individually, and it's more like a French autoloader than it is a flak gun, because the thing about the 2cm flaks is that they sort of fire pretty quickly. That's their whole, flak whirling thing, that's their whole shoot down the planes. They don't fire them in 3 bursts like an like a French autoloader. So yeah, it's basically had all of its ammo stripped, all of its magazine stripped away and everything, and it's just, yeah, no. And then of course we've got the good old T-26, the old cruiser, which has still got a 40mm pom-pom, and it actually has 2 shells in the magazine, which is half what it used to have when it was tier 2, but, it'll do. It's well enough. It's just like having a permanent 2-shell magazine instead of a 4-shell magazine. It hasn't really affected it that much. Of course, we've got the good old Panzer Hargo. I only like the skin because of the camo. And I mean, it's a good thing that they don't have the old Panzer, like Anglerfish team or whatever, on there, because this is from a different school in terms of the anime. But yeah, I just like the camo of this. If we had camos like this for all of the Japanese tanks, I'd probably play a lot more Japanese tanks. But as it is, we do have nice camos for the Jap tanks. However, this camo just sort of stands out and it looks nice. So yeah, we got that. We got the VAE, which doesn't have the 40mm Bofors. No, it doesn't. It just has the 20k 45mm Russian type gun. So it doesn't have its Bofors anymore, which is a bit of a shame. And then we got the R35, which again doesn't have its 6-shot 25mm, which was the whole fun of playing the French tanks at low tiers. The only reason people really played the low tier French tanks is because that 25mm autocannon, which had the 6 shells in the magazine, was a blast to play. But now it's just got a solid shot 37mm, very stubby gun, which they would have had. So I guess, yay, historical accuracy, but still I haven't touched this tank in forever. And then we got the Vickers Mark F from the newest line in the game so far, which is the European tree, which has a mixture of like Polish, French and Italian, Polish, Finnish and Italian tanks, which is a bit of an odd mix, but hey, more tanks, I guess. And this is a decent tank. I do like the tank. Also the camo, the European camos are pretty cool. I do quite like the European camos. But yeah, so there you go, that's tier 1. No one cares about tier 1. So we'll move on to tier 2. So we got the T7 combat car, which was a free tank at some point. I think you can also buy it with like a Steam bundle, and it also comes on to sell very, very rarely. But this, along with most other tier 2s, are also pretty not worthwhile playing. You have 9 bullets in the M2 Browning in here, which is a big downgrade from what it used to have, and at best you can get like 70 damage out of it, but otherwise you're doing about 40 damage for a 7-second reload, which is alright. Well, it's not really, it's 40 damage for a 7-second reload, and you don't have that great pen either on the ammo. You do carry a whole load of it, but you can't spray and pray it like you used to, so yeah, this thing's more of a novelty and collector's piece than an actual functioning tank. I wouldn't suggest anyone play it. T1E6 is still an alright tank at tier 2. You do still have 2 rounds of two shells in the magazine instead of 5, so you can't quite clip tanks like you used to, but it's still fun enough playing, a bit like, you know, the pom-pom on the cruiser, again. So if you do have the T1E6, and they occasionally sell it in the shop, I think it was also given away at some point. But yeah, if you have it, it is still one of the few decent Tier 2 tanks to play. T2 Light, I've never played it. I got it from like a crate or something, and I've never played it, so I can't really say on its effectiveness. It does have a, what, 220mm? Hispiano Suiza gun, which 3 shots in the magazine, 2 per shot, so that's 6 for 44 pen, doing 12 damage. So yeah, it's like all of the other autoloaders. They've all been nerfed pretty hard to make very few of them actually worth playing. But you know, you still got that. Good news though, the micro mouse was pretty much unchanged thanks to the updates. It's pretty much just stayed how it was, which you know, is fun. Everyone loves the micro mouse. aka the Panzer 38H, which is a French tank in the German tech tree, because you know, the Germans loved repurposing people's captured tanks to supplement their own not completely 100% great industry. But yeah, otherwise, you know, it's a fun tank still. You know, you take it out once in a while. You know, it's still pretty much unchanged. It still has decent enough armor. You can kind of angle it. However, there are a lot of tanks now that can pen it, unlike before. Especially if you don't come up against something like a cruiser played by a noob. If you come up against any of these tanks or any of the other removed tanks, they're probably going to be played by a decent player, or at least someone who has played the game for, you know, a few thousand battles, so they'll know exactly what to deal with you. So it's not quite as effective as it once was, but it's still fairly effective. Now we've got the tank destroyers. The Panzerjäger 1 is literally a Tier 2 Jagdtiger, but without the armor. It's a very fun tank to play. It's got a very dangerous 50mm gun. Yeah, one of the best tanks to play at Tier 2s. If you do have any of these collectors tanks now, as they're branded, that were removed in update 5.5, if you have got any of these tanks, the tank destroyers are the things to go for. They are probably the only effective tank that you'll have in your lineup that's truly effective. This thing has got a very good DPM. I think it's probably got like the highest DPM at Tier 2. Which is great. This is a very good 50mm Pak 38. What's it got? There you go, 645 DPM, which is pretty good. It fires 1 shot every 6 seconds with decent pen, decent damage. Yeah, you can tear apart a lot of people with this. Of course, it is very flimsy, so you can't. So it's a sniper tank, definitely. However, I have carried some games on it. It is a very good tank, and it's probably my favourite Tier 2, and will continue to be for ever and ever since update 5.5. The Tetrarch is still the good old Tetrarch, nothing much to say about it. Very good 2-pounder in the Russian tree, because Wargaming have put it in as a Lend-Lease tank rather than a British tank, which is, yeah. Light airborne tank designed for use in the Hamilcar glider, was used in like Operation Market Garden, I think, probably, and also some of the other airborne landings. Yeah, it's still a decent tank, very fast, very mobile, very little armor, but a very good high penetration, decent firing gun. Yeah. If you have the Tetrarch, it's again one of the few tanks worthwhile playing. Light 6, you can forget about it, same as the other autoloaders, which have got. This has got a 15mm machine gun on it, and it's the same deal as the T7 combat car. You've got 4 shots in the magazine with two bullets per shot, and it is yeah, that makes what, 8 shells for 41 average pen, 9 damage. Yeah, you're not going to be doing a lot of damage in for a reload time of 7.5 seconds. So yeah, pretty worthwhile playing this thing. It is a nice collector's tank. Yes, you can take it out occasionally, but you'll never do well in it anymore. It's just nowhere near as fun as it used to be to magazine tanks, because you just don't have all of those bullets to ricochet off a French tank or go straight through a lightly armoured Panzerjäger. The cruiser, yeah, it's still a good old cruiser. It doesn't have the howitzer, which is the main gimmick and fun of playing the cruiser one, because the cruiser one used to get a 3-inch howitzer, which is a 76mm howitzer, and it was able to pretty much one-shot most targets at Tier 2 and 1, or do a lot of damage with its HE, and that was the fun of it. But now it's just got the good old pom-pom again, which is, you know, it's a decent enough Tier 2 tank, and Tier 2 gun. 2 shells in the magazine, same old thing. Can do 40 damage with a 7-second reload. Yeah. or well, 40 damage per shot, so 80 damage for a 7-second reload. It's far better than a light 6, is what I'm trying to say. The Cruiser, of course, again, pom-pom, same thing, it's just faster than the Cruiser 1. Faster, and it's got some relatively troll armor if people don't have a high penetration gun, such as these extra armor pieces on the side of the turret, for one. Panzer 2Js still struggle to penetrate it as a Panzer 2J. But yeah, so, you know, Cruiser, still, it's the Tech 3 tank, what can you say? Medium 2, yeah, got this back, realised why I didn't have it, but I wanted it for the nostalgia. It's got a decent enough 57mm, the 6-pounder on it is pretty good, but for an 8-second reload it is a bit eh. It also doesn't have a particularly high amount of health for its very, very weak armour. It's got like 8mm of frontal armour all round. Well, 8mm all round. There's no way it's going to bounce anything, and things will go through you every which way. Which means that if you get focused, you will die, and you have got a pretty long reload on that 57mm. Otherwise, it's a solid gun pretty much. However, the Universal Carrier has got exactly the same gun and outclasses it in pretty much every single way. It's actually got more armour. If you have a look, 10mm of frontal hull armour on the Bren gun carrier, for 8mm of frontal hull armour on the medium 2. It's baffling. Not that you'll bounce anything in this anyway, however it's got exactly the same gun with exactly the same reload, except on a far more mobile and far sneakier chassis. And like I said, the tank destroyers at tier 2 are the thing to go for, so yeah, very fun tank to play. It's one of the few tanks I still play when I go down to tier 2. This and the Panzerjäger, and occasionally the Tetrarch and the Micro Mouse are the ones I play now. D1, sorry, again, that was also removed. Obviously, you've got the AMX-38 as the Tech Tree tank now. Still a decent tank. Again, it does have a 47mm in the turret. SA-34A. Yeah, that looks like a 47mm to me. It's got pretty decent stats for the gun. Again, the fun of playing the D1 was the 25mm auto cannon with the 6 shells in the magazine, doing 25 damage, I think, per shot, which was great fun, doing 25 average damage in a single magazine, at least. But yeah, otherwise it's you know, it's an alright tank. It's got fairly decent turret armour, 40, 40, 35, but the hull 30 all round. Yes, it is sloped, you can bounce things, but otherwise it's just your general slow French tank. And then we've got the FTAC, which is the worst tank destroyer I have in my lineup here, because I've got the Panzerjäger, the Universal Carrier, and the FTAC, and the FTAC is just the worst one of the bunch. It has got a decent enough 47mm gun again, however, 466 average DPM, with a 5.8 second reload time for 66 damage, but it only has 45 average damage. Sorry, 66 average pen. Pen is good, damage is not. Aim time dispersion, very good, it's very accurate. However, the Panzerjäger is just as accurate, has got a slightly worse reload, but for an extra 20 average damage. Yeah, it's got, the Panzerjäger has got 200 DPM over this thing, and this thing is far slower with, again, very little armor for it. And yeah, it is honestly not worth playing if you have got the Panzerjäger or the Universal Carrier, because the only fun of playing the FTAC was to use the 25mm burst gun, which was the 25mm autocannon on steroids. It had 3 shells per shot and 4 in the magazine for a total of 12 shots, and it was a spread sort of thing, and it was great fun just firing out 12 different shots at this thing. I have got videos of the FTAC back when it had the 25mm, and all I want is Wargaming to bring that gun back to it. That's all I want, and then I'll start playing it again. Otherwise, there's not much point playing it. If you're wondering where the old tier 1s are, they're gone. No more MS1, no more LOL Tractor, no more Renault FT, which is a shame because those were fun tanks and good tanks to play, but now, yeah, we don't have them anymore, so goodbye Medium 1 as well. But then we come to tier 3, and I've got the Locust, which is a decent enough tier 3, and it is the first tier where we start to get premium ammo back, because they stripped any sort of premium ammo from the tier 2. And when I get to a certain tank, you'll see why that's a problem. But yeah, Locust, decent. It was the American airborne tank, sort of similar to the Tetrarch, but the American design. Never played this tank either. I just happened to have it from a crate again. One of the free crates, one of the free containers, where in these containers you used to be able to get more tanks than this. You used to get tier 3s and stuff, and so I got it from that. otherwise, yeah, I think it's a fairly decent tank. It has a 37mm, yeah, what more can you say? Decent enough armour, etc, etc. Panzer 2J has been absolutely torn to shreds. Everyone who used to have this tank before update 5.5 sold this tank at update 5.5. I only got this thing back because it was relatively cheap and I didn't have it and I wanted it to counterpart my BTSV. And the BTSV is the better tank out of the two. This thing has got very good armour, however, due to the current meta of low tiers, the armour counts for nothing and you only have 46mm of pen with your premium APCR. And you also have got 8 shells in the magazine instead of 10 still. Yeah, so yeah, you're absolutely not making any sort of profit with this thing, and you're also probably not going to get that much done in it. It does have decent armour still. A lot of tanks will still bounce off you, especially tanks with very low pen like the T15, but otherwise, yeah, there's absolutely no point playing this thing other than for the bans. Panzer 3A was a free tank given out Christmas. I've never played it. Oh, I've played it like once or twice. It is basically the Panzer 3 except less OP. It's got worse armour than the Panzer 3 at least. It still has got a decent gun. This is the short 50mm as opposed to the long 50mm on the Protectory Panzer 3. So yeah, this is the second gun that they mounted on the Panzer 3. And it's sort of like a mashup of various Panzer 3 models. It's like got the hull of an A and it's got the turret of a D or something. No, Panzerkampfwagen Aufführung E. So yeah, it's sort of got Panzer A suspension, the Panzer E turret. It's a bit of a mix of various Panzers, but they call it a Panzer 3A. It's a decent enough tier 3 tank. Everyone got given it for free for Christmas, so can't exactly complain. Yeah, just a decent enough tank. T15, never played this tank either, I don't think. It's just I think it's a Czechoslovakian tank in the German tech tree again. It's a pretty mobile, fast little tank. It has got a pretty terrible gun with only 42mm of average pen with a AP and 74 with APCR, so yeah, not that great. This version is aim time's pretty decent. Reload time in 3 seconds, so yeah, pretty rapid fire tank. Yeah, I mean, it's an alright tank as far as I can tell, except for the pen, so coming up against stronger armoured targets you will have problems, but otherwise it's a fairly decent tank. Panzer S35 is, yeah, it's alright. I find that the armour is not as effective as it used to be, however. Otherwise, the 47mm gun, again, is not that great in penetration. Well, actually, no, it has got 84mm of average pen. You will struggle again against armoured targets, heavily armoured targets like Matildas, Panzer 3s, Panzer 2Js. Otherwise, yeah, fairly solid tank. You can get bounces off it if people hit it the wrong way. Turret can be a bit troll as well. Otherwise, yeah, medium tank, tier 3, what can you say? Now, this thing is the bane of tier 3. This thing is in the meta right now. It's got everything, and from update 5.5 onwards, this is the seal clubbing tank of choice. Everyone right now watching, after you've watched the video, or whilst you're watching it, don't really mind, go into World of Tanks, select a tier 3 tank, and go into a game. Guaranteed you will have at least 1 or 2 Panzer 3s. And in most cases, guaranteed, one of those Panzer 3s will be a seal clubber. Due to the armour and the gun of this thing, it has got 50mm of frontal hull armour and 55 frontal turret armour. It's got great mobility, it's got a very good long-barreled 50mm with 6.2 second reload time, 65 average pen with AP for 80 damage, very good accuracy and aim time, only 6 degrees of gun depression, but that still doesn't matter when it can go at 37 kilometers per hour with a 21 horsepower per weight. Horsepower per ton ratio, and it also has got over 40 degrees on both hull and turret reverse, nearly 50 degrees on its hull. A professional seal clubber will have absolutely no qualms with driving straight at your tier 2 or tier 3 tank and face hugging you, and there's not a single thing you can do about it because it's 50mm at the front of the turret plus an extra pit here of spaced armour, which means that absolutely nothing is getting through the front of that turret at this tier nearly. High explosive can impact on it and it will have very little effect. The armour at range is absolutely very, very good. Yeah, it's got 20mm of extra armour over the 30mm of hull armour, which is why it's 50mm in total. And this thing is just, yeah, it is the seal clubber of tier 3, it is the tank of choice. It's just the bane of everyone's existence. This thing just floods Matchmaker at tier 3, just round the clock. It is just the seal clubbing tank. What else can I say? Gross Tractor. Gross Tractor is still a pretty fun tank. A shame it doesn't have HE, because HE would be you know, an extra thing to add to this thing, and it would be the crowning jewel of the Gross Tractor, because it is still a fun tank. It was relatively unchanged in update 5.5. It's still got terrible hull armor, but it's still got 12 degrees of gun depression and 60 degrees of gun elevation. So yeah, it's pretty crazy. The gun itself is a short barrel 75, only has 78mm of AP pen, but it does do a decent amount of damage when it hits, and it's got a 10-12 second reload, so yeah, it could be worse. It's still a decent fun tank. You know, you can impact heat on Panzer IIIs at least and do decent damage to them, so give them a taste of their own medicine. So yeah, I mean, it's otherwise it's a pretty fun tank, just you won't bounce anything, but it is a tier 3 heavy, so it's got a decent amount of HP. Marder 3 recently got this back. Very fun tank, very good long 75mm pack gun on it, based off the Panzer II chassis, so you can bounce things occasionally. If they hit your frontal armour at an angle, they can bounce, otherwise they'll just go straight through your upper casemate sort of area here. Otherwise, yeah, very good tank destroyer. 12.5 second reload, but it does have very good pen, very good accuracy. Let me just double check that. Okay, ignore what I said about accuracy. It doesn't have very good accuracy at all. It has 0.37 accuracy, but when it hits, it does do decent damage. 120. Yeah, 120 and 105 with APCR. It does have 96 average pen with AP and 166 with APCR. There is absolutely nothing at tier 3 and 4 that you will struggle to get through. It is a knife through butter. It is a very good tank destroyer when it ranges on you. So yeah, definitely play that if you have it in your garage. BTSV, pretty troll BT7, very fast, very mobile, absolutely no gun depression, but it does have a decent enough gun. It works better at sides and rears, but it does at least have 84mm of frontal armour. Yeah, very good sloped armour on it, very good at bouncing things. Even Panzer IIIs can bounce off of you. Again, angling and wiggling as you're driving around at like 60 kilometers an hour. It is a very good tank to play. Yeah, very fun tank as well, and you know, you can bounce a lot of shots off of it. So yeah, otherwise pretty decent tank. T7057, I missed out on getting the original T70, which I'm very upset about, but I at least have this to make up for it. It's a decent enough tank. You can bounce things off of your frontal armor. It's like 35 frontal hull, but it is at least sloped, and so you can bounce things off of it and off of your turret. It's got a decent 57mm, even if it is a bit slow in firing. The reload time is a bit of a killer, but otherwise, yeah, decent enough tank, relatively mobile. It's not the quickest thing at this tier, but it is still pretty fun. M3 Light, I've had this for ages. Gun is not that great on it, but it is basically otherwise an M3 Stuart with the stock turret. Stock turret, stock gun, M3 Stuart is what it is, just in the Russian tech tree, because again, Lend-Lease. Yeah, gun doesn't have the greatest pen, but it does fire relatively quickly, and you can kind of bounce things off of it because it is a Stuart. It is a Stuart frontal hull, so you can bounce things off of it. Otherwise, yeah, pretty fast, pretty fun mobile tank, comparable to the Stuart. So if you do have the M3 or the M5, you'll probably like the M3 Light if you ever get it. BT7 Artillery, the only tank at this tier which has got high explosive. It only has AP and HE. Yeah, the only tank to have HE, and it can do 200 damage per shot if you penetrate with HE, which is very fun. It is very mobile. Turret traverse is pretty slow. Actually, no, it isn't. It's 41 degrees. That's pretty decent. Pen, however, is not very decent at all. Pen with AP is 37. Pen with HE, 38. Don't know how that works. HE has got 1 better millimeters of pen. So, yeah, don't know why you'd go with AP, but you might as well carry it. Just because, you never know. You never know, your HE may do less damage because it hits a track when your AP would have gone through. You never know. Otherwise, absolutely no armour, but it is still a pretty fast, pretty fun tank. dispersion is all over the place, works best at close range. Very satisfying though to get those HE penetrations and do half of someone's health at this tier. Yeah, very fun. LTP, pretty decent tank, again, has got a 45mm Russian gun. Very small profile, very good camo rating therefore. Does have some alright sloped armour, so you can bounce things off of it, otherwise they will go through your turret, I believe. Otherwise, yeah, pretty fun, pretty mobile tank. I've had this tank for ages as well. I've had all of these tanks. All of these tanks I've had since before update 5.5, apart from the medium and the Marder. That's the way to put it. Su-76I, still one of the best tanks at this tier. Very good frontal hull armour, based off of Panzer III of course, so it is very mobile. You can keep up with some mediums as they circle around you, which will definitely catch them off guard, and you do have 60mm of frontal hull armour, which is very good at this tier, plus it does slope a little bit here. Very good 76mm gun, again, has very high penetration. Well, it has decent penetration. The accuracy is a bit but it does do 120 damage average per shot. If you can get this thing when it appears in the shop, do, because I got it with the Ice Claw camo and it is a very good tank. The cruiser, first thing with the actual 40mm Bofors, very high penetration, very decent armour. Well, not very decent armour, sorry, decent damage and pen. And it does only have 2 shells in the magazine instead of 4, which is a bit of a shame. However, it can still deal with its targets pretty effectively. Armour is nothing to write home about. It's pretty terrible armour against anything apart from like a Panzer IIJ or some of the lower penetration guns like the T-15. Otherwise, yeah, very fast, very mobile, medium tank, pretty fun to play. Medium 3 on the other hand though is basically a medium 2 but with a reload buff and a bit more health. Yeah, it is definitely not worth getting it back like I did. The gun reload time does get cut in half, so it does only have 4 seconds of reload for the 6-pounder, which has got decent pen, decent damage, so you can rack up the damage very quickly. However, this thing suits more of a support line medium or a tank destroyer playstyle, because the armour is still only 8mm thick and things will just easily go through you. A Panzer IIJ will have no problems getting through your tank. That's how terrible the armour is on this thing. But yeah, otherwise it's a decent enough tank if you can get the gun to work. Otherwise it's completely worthless. Talking of completely worthless, FCM 36 Pack 40, everyone calls it the worst tank at tier 3. Besides the Panzer IIJ, and I can understand why, but it does have one thing going for it that the Panzer IIJ does not, and that's a gun that can actually kill things. It has got a 75mm pack, the same as the Marder, so it has got very high penetration and very good damage and decent accuracy. No, screw that. 47. If we were to put refined gun, 0.38 accuracy. So yeah, there you go. Absolutely no accuracy. I retract my statement. Absolutely no accuracy on it, however when it hits it does hit hard. Otherwise, absolutely no armour, very slow, very immobile. Definitely a rear line sniper. If you get anywhere near the front you will be killed very, very quickly, and you don't have the mobility to get out of the way. Otherwise, yeah, the gun is very good. That's the only thing going for it. Now, tier 4. T6E1. Very fun tier 4 medium tank. It has got a decent enough gun on it, I do have to say. The armour is alright for this tier, definitely. The gun has got a 10-second reload on it, but it does do 120 damage per shot, the same as all of the other low tier 75s. Penetration is alright on it, like I said. Armour is pretty alright as well. Yeah, just a pretty fun American medium tank. It's a bit like a prototype Sherman, as it were, just with a crap ton of machine guns on it. Panzer B2, the most OP thing at this tier, most people will agree. It's basically a B1, except far more mobile and far faster firing. It's got very good armour on it, very good mobility. So yeah, the gun itself is not that great. It's got very low penetration, but it does have very rapid fire. It does only see tier 4s. It is one of the only tanks in all of World of Tanks that only sees its own tier or below, because the gun is just so terrible. Only it and the Valentine 2 sees its own tier. Otherwise it'll only see tier 4 and 3, which is some sort of preferential matchmaking for you. Of course, weak spot is the driver's hatch and the removed Hull 75mm support howitzer gun. yeah, otherwise it's a very fun tank to play still. You will obviously struggle against higher armoured targets like the Matilda. Otherwise it can tear through low tiers and some of its own tiers with ease, and there's very little they can do against it because, yeah, just very, very good armour all round pretty much. A32, it's like a prototype T34 and it is very, very fun. It's got a short-barreled, pretty terrible 76mm gun on it. However, the armour itself is pretty good. It is, of course, sloped. It's not quite as thick as the T34, but the sloping obviously helps to reduce that. You can bounce some things off your turret, but it's not reliable. It is, however, very fast and very mobile, and yeah, it's just a fun tank to play, even in tier 5 games. It's just you do decent damage with the gun. Yeah, overall, pretty good medium tank. AC1 Sentinel, decent armour. It's comparable in armour to like the Matilda, nearly, except it's slightly thicker. It's slightly thinner, especially on the turret. However, it does have a fast-firing 2-pounder. It's not a 2-pounder with a Little John adapter, like the Matilda. However, it's still pretty decent. You can get adrenaline boost, or just adrenaline on this tank. So you can pop that, and your reload goes to like 2 seconds per shot, which, doing 40 damage per shot, that very quickly racks up if you manage to get someone in the open. You can bounce things off of your armour as well. You have got fairly decent armour for the tier, and overall it's just a pretty fun tank. The Valentine 2 is the better version of the Valentine Mark 9, I do have to say, in pretty much every single way. It's got better armour, it's got better mobility, it only sees its own tier, it has got arguably a better gun, it's just got generally all-round better stats, and it also, I think, makes more credits. Don't quote me on that though, because I'm not too sure on the credit coefficiency between the two of them. However, the only thing that the Valentine Mark 9 beats it in is gun penetration. This thing, and also ammunition stowage. No, Valentine 2 carries more ammo. This thing has got a 45mm Russian, 20k or something like that, 20k gun, and it is terrible in terms of penetration, but very good in rapid fire. You want to carry a decent supply of APCR, because if you come up against things like Matildas, there is absolutely no way you're penetrating them with a regular AP. Regular AP does something like 46mm of pen, the same as the Panzer B2, so yeah, there's very little at this tier that you'll get through with AP, if you're not aiming specifically. The Valentine Mark 9, yeah, it's worse in pretty much every single way. It's slower, less mobile, has slightly worse armour, only in the sides of the turret where it's like 5mm less, which doesn't really count. Otherwise, the only reason this thing is any good is because the gun has got 130mm of pen on its AP round. But it does have a 7-second reload, which means that its DPM is absolutely terrible. The armour itself is decent. However, yeah, just 7 seconds of reload for this tank is just not good at all. It's pretty crippling, actually. So yeah, there is very little reason to actually get back a Mark 9 Valentine if you can get Valentine 2, because even with its lower penetration, it is just far more fun to play and far better to play as well. The Covenanter was given away, well, not quite given away. It practically was with Operation Onslaught. It was given away to people if they got a pass, or even if they didn't have a pass, they got the tank. I'm not too sure, but this thing just was everywhere in the time of Operation Onslaught. It's kind of calmed down now when everyone's got it and people have stopped playing it as regularly. Otherwise, it is a fun enough medium tank, or light tank even. The armour itself is pretty terrible. However, it does have the good old 40mm Bofors in its old iteration. This is how it used to be back in the day before update 5.5, where it has 2 shells in the magazine and two shots per magazine. So a total of 4 shells doing 40 average damage, which means you can do 40, 80, 120, 160. And that's how it used to be back in the day for tier 2 tanks as well, when they had the 40mm Bofors, or tier 3 tanks. But yeah, gun is decent, 80mm of average pen with AP. Yeah, very fast, very mobile. Very little armour. However, if you can get on the flanks, you can easily rack up damage on even tier 5 heavy tanks. Yeah, just generally a decent burst gun. So the Matilda, good old Matilda. Little John adapter means that it does have very high penetration just for very low damage, because it is only a 2-pounder, so it only does 40 damage per shot, I think. So yeah, Very little damage, however, very fast firing. You can get adrenaline, which means it goes up even further. Your armor can even prove difficult for tier 5 tanks to penetrate, which just goes to show it has 75 mil of frontal armor on the hull and 95 on the front of the turret. Yeah, still a very good tank at this tier, one of the few that was unchanged because it's still in the tech tree. It is the only tech tree British tank at tier 4, and that's a lie, they still have the Electo. But otherwise, yeah, this is still a very fun tank. Obviously play it if you can. M5A1 Stuart, it's basically an M5 Stuart just in the Chinese tech tree with a different gun. The gun itself is fairly decent. It's a pretty mobile light tank. You can bounce things off of your frontal hull because it's thick enough, and with the sloping it just works near enough. Obviously things can go through it frontally, however some of the lower penetration guns or guns at range can bounce, especially if they hit it at an angle. The gun itself is fairly decent. It's got decent enough penetration, relatively quick reload for what it is, and yeah, so overall this is a pretty fun tank. Now, the good old AMX-40, aka the Duck as people call it, still very good armour on it. Because it is so rounded, it is a very, very nice tank to look at because it is just so rounded and so smooth, which means that tanks will very easily bounce. The only real weak spot on it is the upper machine gun turret and also this area here at where I think the transmission is. Actually no, the transmission will be at the back. So, but either way, this is still the thinnest part of the armour. Otherwise, it's got armour comparable to a Matilda, so that just goes to show. The gun, however, is nowhere near as good. It is a 75mm, however, it's got 74mm of pen on its regular AP, which just won't cut it against tier 5 tanks. But you do at least have HE and heat to hit them with, if not. Otherwise, 70 rounds of ammo, you can get through most tier 4 tanks with it. And yeah, tanks will very easily bounce if you angle yourself like that. The only other weak spot, actually thinking about it, is this driver's viewport. But otherwise, yeah, still a fun enough tank to play, just so long as you don't mind the slow speed of it. The B1 as well is a fun tank. Comparable to the Panzer B2, except with a slower firing but higher penetration 47mm in the turret. Obviously weak spots are exactly the same. It has got pretty much the same armour. It is, I think, slower and less mobile, but only by a small amount. Otherwise, yeah, fun enough heavy tank to play, and of course it is one of the 2 French tier 4 tanks that you can play now. So at least we got that. Tier 5, I'll just go through all of Tier 5 because there's a lot, and then everything else will be in a different video. So, M4A2E4, or as I call it, the Easy 4 Sherman. I got this thing in a bundle with the Hydrostat, and it's a fairly decent American medium tank. It's nothing to write home about. It's a jack of all trades. It does everything adequately, pretty much. You can bounce shots off your hull because it is sloped decently, and it does have sloped side armor, so you can bounce things off of it. The turret as well, it's a stock American Sherman turret, so yeah, nothing too spectacular. However, it can bounce shots, like I said. It's mobile enough. It's just your typical American medium tank. The gun penetration does lack a bit, however it's decent enough. It's an all-rounder tank, really. The Ram 2, Canadian tank. I think it's the only Canadian tank in the game, actually. Fairly decent armour. Weak spot is, of course, the machine gun. The only problem that might turn off some people is that it does have a 6-pounder in the turret, which means that you do have to expose yourself to do more damage. Otherwise, yeah, rapid fire. You can, of course, use adrenaline to get the firepower up more. It has fairly decent. It has decent pen actually for the tier. I think it's still 130 pen for 60 damage or whatever it is. I can't remember. But of course you can mount your provisions and etc, etc, and yeah, it will go up even faster. So yeah, decent enough tank otherwise. Again, nothing too spectacular, but the armour is at least decent for the tier. T14 is a pretty decent American heavy tank that most people, I think, sleep on. Not many people actually talk about this tank when they're talking about decent tier 5 tanks, especially heavy tanks, but otherwise armour is very good. It has got the same gun as the Easy 4 Sherman, but the armour works. The armour is sloped. It has got a decent gun on it, even so, for the tier. And yeah, it's just an all-round pretty decent heavy tank. And it's kept its premium status rather than being a collectible like a bunch of tanks that were changed. Panzer IV Hydrostat. It's basically a Panzer IV but more mobile. I think, and less armour as well. The armour of this thing is only 30mm at the front rather than 50mm, I think, for the Panzer IV-G. So that's the trade-off you're getting, but it is more mobile. It has got a funky looking rear because it has got a hydrostat engine, which I think is like a water electric engine, something along those lines. Some weird German experimental engine, because of course it is. Otherwise, yeah, it's just a more mobile Panzer IV. Absolutely no reason to dislike this tank. I do like it. It's a decent medium at this tier. 110 average pen, 160 average damage. It's your standard German 75mm gun. Decent tank. Talking of decent tanks, KV-220T. Definitely one of the best tier 5 tanks in the game. Very strong frontal armour, because it is basically a KV-3 hull, just worse armour. It still has got 100mm of frontal armour, and the turret is of course the weak spot, as is the gun. The gun is not that great, however it can get through most tier 5 tanks pretty easily. Carries a whole load of rounds, very good armour. Definitely buy it if you can. I bought it ages ago and have not regretted it. It is a very fun tank to play, especially when people don't know what to do against you. As you will have seen from some of my videos where I'm playing this tank and I get stuck in like a 1v4 or something and there's just nothing they can do. It is just a very good, very solid tank. Angry Connor, a bit of a weird tank, based off of a Valentine chassis, except the gun's mounted backwards. So driving forwards, you're going in reverse, kind of. So you only have 15, I think it's something like 15 kilometers an hour forwards, but you have like 60 in the back. It is very, very weird. You sort of drive backwards at the enemy and then turn around to hit them. But if you can get past that, it's a pretty solid tank. It's fairly sneaky. It does have a 17-pounder, which has got the highest penetration at this tier out of anything. Very high penetration, pretty accurate, decent pen. Yeah, decent pen, decent damage. If you can just... It is an archer. It's a Valentine Archer, but of course they call it an Angry Connor because it's for St. Patrick's Day, special St. Patrick's Day thing. Yeah, if you can just get past driving it backwards, it's a decent tank. Chinukai, aka the Shinobi. I've had this thing for like 5 years, and I've had it when it was originally called the Shinobi and was released for some Japanese game show. And yeah, it used to be called the Shinobi. It was very rare, and it still is rare. They sold it for like 100 quid. Recently. No, not recently, but they have sold it for like 100 quid in the past, and it is absolutely not worth it, because it is a decent tank. It's got very decent pen. It's got a decent anti-tank gun just in general. 125 average pen with 160 average damage. The armour itself, 75mm at the front, nothing spectacular. You can get bounces, but otherwise it will go through. If you have a Chino, you may not want this tank. The camo looks cool, and I do enjoy this tank. It is a fun, decent medium tank. However, there are alternatives if you don't like it. For example, the Chino. The Wolverine M10. It's an alright tank destroyer. I've never really got into it. The armour can bounce things. So the armour is surprisingly alright for this tier. The gun itself is pretty doesn't have the high penetration of a tank destroyer. It is a medium tank gun in essence. This can be a medium tank in a pinch, but the turret only traverses at something like 16 degrees, so it's nothing amazing. However, it is still a fairly decent and fun tank destroyer. You can bounce shots off of it, like I said, and yeah, just all round it's alright. Now the old 5/4. I had this tank before it was introduced as a Tech Tree purchasable premium tank, and since it went into general circulation, I've just stopped playing it, because it is still a fun tank and it's still a decent tank, but it's just so many of them now that it's just not special to play anymore. Don't get me wrong, it is a good tank and it's still a very unique tank. It is a Panther hull with a Panzer IV chassis. Panther. I'll just go with that. Panther chassis, but with a Panzer IV and turret and gun. I think this was something like... I think this was what they did for the prototype before they actually got the Panther turret onto it. So it's an interesting piece of history, and it is a good tank with like 85 frontal hull armor for a medium. It's very good at ramming. It's very good at bouncing things. Just a general all-round very good tank, medium tank, so long as you don't mind having only something like 4 or 5 degrees of gun depression. Otherwise, yeah, very fun tank to play still. Panzer IV-G, good old Panzer IV. What can you say about it? Decent frontal hull armor and the turret as well. These bits, the side skirts, can prove problematic. to get through. Otherwise, if you have enough penetration, you can just go straight through the front of the hull. But you know, still decent enough frontal hull. You can bounce things. I have often bounced off of Panzer IVs when I'm going up against them in a variety of tanks, really. Otherwise, yeah, decent enough tank. Good old Panzer IV. What can you say? T-34. There's two different ways of playing this thing. T-34 57 or T-34 76. Of course, I like going with the 76 for the higher alpha damage. Really, higher alpha damage and higher pen. If you want lower alpha damage, lower pen, just go with like a Type T-34. Otherwise, decent medium tank. You can bounce shots easily off of it. I like side scraping in it because surprisingly you can side scrape in this thing because it has got 45mm of side armor, which is sloped, and it's surprising how much you can actually bounce off of this tank. Very good sloped armor on it, and yeah, very decent medium tank to play. Matilda 4. Only recently got this. Always have been meaning to buy it for like years, but never got round to it. Finally got a discount on it from a daily mission crate, so I decided to go ahead and get it. It's a fun tank. It's nothing too amazing. The Matilda armor kind of loses its stuff at tier 5 and tier 6. It's not as effective as it was at tier 4 now that you're going up against tier 6 guns. However, you can still bounce things off of it. You know, it is still a Matilda at heart. It's got a slightly changed turret to accommodate the larger caliber 76mm Russian gun, which doesn't have the highest penetration, so you will have to carry some premium rounds if you want to get through some of the higher armoured targets. Otherwise, it's a fun enough tank. It is still, however, slow, so if people don't like slow tanks, you probably won't want it. Same with the Churchill 3. Churchill 3 at some point got a different gun, because the Churchill used to have the 6-pounder in it, but now you have an option to mount a Russian 76mm gun on it for higher average damage, but for lower pen and a longer reload, obviously due to the higher caliber. Of course, I run it with the bigger gun, just for again the higher penetration. Sorry, the bigger average damage, 160 average damage as opposed to what 60. Whatever of a 6-pounder. You can obviously run it both ways. It is just a Churchill 1, except without the howitzer in the hull. It's instead got a baser machine gun, and it's also got side skirts. That's the real difference between the two of them. As to which one's better, I don't really know. I can't really say. They both play much for muchness. But yeah, Churchill 3, you can pick it up if you like the original Churchill. Not a lot of people do, and I understand that, but I don't really mind them. KV-1, on the other hand, it's a decent enough heavy tank. You can bounce shots off of your side and frontal armour. However, the frontal armour is not actually that thick. It's only 75mm at the front, which is, in comparison, the same as a Matilda. So bear that in mind, because people can penetrate through your lower glacis and this strip here. So just remember that. However, your turret is pretty good. It does mount an 85mm gun, so you do a decent amount of damage per shot. You do 200 average damage per shot, something along those lines. It is still a decent heavy tank, maybe not the best one, however it is still a fun tank to play, and it does have this very nice legendary skin that you can put on it. Su-85, absolutely terrible with the stock gun. With the upgraded gun, it's a fairly decent tank destroyer. Decent accuracy, long aim time. Armour very occasionally bounces shots. Otherwise, it is still only 45mm sloped. But it is still fairly sneaky, fairly mobile. Yeah, it's just a general all-round decent tank destroyer. What more can you say? Su-85I, on the other hand, is the bigger brother, basically, of the Su-76I. Again, based off of a Panzer III chassis, so it's fairly mobile, but it does only have 60mm of armour, again, which works at tier 3, not so much at tier 5. Most things will go through you, and also the gun penetration isn't that great either. 119 average pen, which means that you will struggle to get through some tanks. However, it does have decent average damage when it hits, and it's still a fairly mobile tank, and it's still pretty fun to play. Crusader is the replacement for the Sherman 5, I believe. It was basically just, yeah, replaced. This thing was shoved into collector status, and this thing put in its place. Decent 6-pounder. It's just your light tank. If you like running around in light tanks, you can of course run around with the Crusader. Just it doesn't have any armor really to speak of. Rapid fire gun. You can obviously go with adrenaline and provisions if you want to get that more. Yeah, mobile fast tank to run around in. nothing much more to say about it. Sherman 5 was bumped back, and you now have an American 75mm gun in it. It's not the same model as in Mod of Tanks PC, which I'm very upset about because I like the Sherman 3 on PC, but here it's just a bit like a stock M4 Sherman. So if you do have this Sherman 5, honestly, the American Sherman Tech Tree version, just the Tier 5 standard Sherman, is probably a better tank than this thing. It gets a better gun, it gets a better turret. Yeah, and it's probably all around just a better tank. But otherwise, if you don't have it and you still have this tank, you're basically getting the same sort of thing. Yeah, Sherman 5, it's just a decent enough Sherman tank at this tier. Comparable to the... yeah, same gun pretty much. So comparable to the Easy 4 Sherman, except with rounded sloping at the front of the tank instead of just clear-cut angles like the Easy 4. Churchill 1, I do like the Churchill 1. It's got a very good high-velocity 75mm Vickers gun on it, which has got decent pen, decent damage, decent accuracy, and the armour as well is not that great. 88 at the front of the hull. Sorry, front of the turret. 152 at the front of the hull, but only in this area. This area is still a weak spot. This area is not 156mm. So remember that, or 152mm. As you can see, here's the extra block of armour. Here it isn't. So just remember that. Your tracks, however, do eat a decent amount of shots, so you can absorb high explosive and heat shells into the side of your tracks, and they will also eat regular AP shells as well, which is the good thing about having these exposed tracks. But of course, not a lot of people like this tank because it is slow, it is big, it is cumbersome, and it's just not worth it for the armour. And I understand that, but I just like Churchills in general. So of course I like this tank. Talking of tanks that people do like, however, 82. Yeah, it's a beast. It's got something like 101 at the rear, which for most tanks at Tier 5 don't have that at the front. The front is 203, the side is like 150, 156 or something. It is ridiculous. The gun, however, is a pop gun. It does 90 damage. I think it's a 6-pounder. However, it doesn't matter that you have to stay in people's line of sight because they can't get through your front anyway. HE will just be absorbed. Honestly, don't even bother trying to splash HE onto this thing because it will not do anything. The cupola is the only weak spot from the front. However, it is still difficult to hit. You can hit like this strip, otherwise it bounces off the rounding. Best way of dealing with this thing is getting around the side and rear if you can. However, if you don't, then you're out of luck, because there's no way you're killing this thing frontally unless you get lucky and hit the hatch multiple times and pen before it can kill you. It is a fun tank to drive around and just see things bouncing off of your armour, because it is still very good in terms of armour. However, of course, the lack of mobility and speed and everything in terms of that category just will not suit everyone. Chinu, can't really say about it. I've only just got it. I'm only grinding through it to get to the Japanese tank destroyers. That's the only reason I have the Chinu. Fully upgraded, I think it's a fairly decent tank from what I've come up against it. It's just a general medium tank. Pretty comparable to all of the other Tier 5 mediums, if we're honest. Not many of them have got distinguishing features other than, hey look, it's this historical tank I recognise. Otherwise, yeah, it will be a decent tank when it's fully upgraded, I can only imagine. Type T-34, on the other hand, I do not like it in comparison to the T-34. 5 degrees of gun depression, not that great. Lower penetration and lower damage. Does have decent DPM, but you have to fire double the shots in order to do the same damage and expose yourself far more often in order to do that damage as well. It did get a pen buff recently, goes from 112 to like 119 or something, but even so, I still do not like this tank in comparison. If you like the more rapid-fire gun tanks, then still just go for the Russian T-34. Honestly, it has better gun depression with its 57mm, and it has got the same sort of comparable properties as the 57mm on this thing. The only reason you'd play this thing is because either you're going through the Chinese tech tree or you like the camo. Either one. They're the only reasons I can think of for this. My 5 T-34 got this in the Blitz 5th birthday rather than the 6th birthday. And of course I have got the attachment, which adds this cool glow, and it also adds some sparks coming out of it when it drives along. This is a hybrid nation tree tank. It's fairly decent. It's a T-34, stock T-34 turret with the upgraded T-34 gun on a Cromwell chassis, which means you can bounce things off of the Cromwell chassis. It is, after all, a Tier 6 tank hull at Tier 5. However, it does only have like 75mm frontal armour, so you're not going to bounce everything. However, you can bounce things off of the side armour, especially if it catches it at an odd angle. The gun itself is fairly decent, with decent pen, decent damage as well. Rear armour is, of course, very weak. A lot of people don't like the hybridnation trees because of A, the engine sounds, and B, how they look, and C, they're not historical tanks. Which is understandable, but I think I like the idea, I like the inclusion of the hybridation tree, because it allows individual tanks from different nations who can't get their own tree, and they don't want to put them in. For example, the Sturv 74, that is like a, Swedish tank? And we don't have Swedish tanks in the game yet, so hybridation tree makes sense. And it also helps give Blitz its own unique personality. They can put in these special tanks, like the tank inside the Gravedigger, the Nightmare, the Y5s, etc., etc., and they can put them all in their own individual tree. But the tank itself is fairly decent. Yeah, decent medium tank for the tier. Very, very quick, very mobile, very manoeuvrable. Pretty fun time all round to play. And finally, we've got the Nightmare, which is a Stug 4. Not a Stug 3, I don't think. Is it? No, I don't know. It could be a Stug 3. Although it could be a Stug 4. Honestly, I have no idea. No, this is a Stug 3. Looking at the drivetrain and suspension arrangement, this is a Stug 3. But it's a Stug 3 with the 105, because the 105 mils, all of the derp guns basically, at low tiers, were removed, which meant no more 105 on the VK. There was no more 105 on the Sherman, on the Panzer IV, to name a few. The same as the Hetzer didn't have its derp gun anymore, which was a lot of the reason why people played the Hetzer. The Stug didn't have its derp gun either. However, they did repackage it and put it in as the Nightmare, which was one of the two Halloween tanks for 2019's Halloween event. The other one was, of course, the Lupus. No, not the Lupus, sorry, the Lycan. Lycan Lupus, they sound the same. But yeah, this is basically a Stug with the 105. And it fires heat as standard, which is alright. However, AP might have been more useful, especially for getting through solid objects when people are hiding behind them, because of course heat and HE will just impact on the solid object and explode. However, it does have decent damage. It's got decent armor. It is OP. It was OP when it came in, and it's still OP now. I think most people agree. So a lot of people don't like when you drive something like this, because it is a pretty OP tank with very good armor and a high damage gun, which has got very good penetration and damage for the tier. It can like half health you with a single shot. But there you go. So that is all the tanks from tiers 1 to 5 that I have in my garage. I tried to go over them very quickly, however, this is still probably going to be like an hour long or something. But there you go. So I'll do all the tanks from tier 6 to 10 in a different video. But for now, I'll thank you all for watching, and goodbye.